prior to 1979. How many of you were born prior to 1979? What? All right. How many of you were born after 1979? Okay. Wow. Got a lot of young people. Pastor and I are getting old. Many of you may not realize this, but Iran was one of our best friends. Iran was actually not just a friend of America, but a friend of Israel. How many know what I'm telling you is the truth? I mean, that's one of our best buddies. And of course, you see the Shah of Iran. I mean, this guy was, we were just tight. Okay? Not me and him, but you know, okay? Up to that point, though, when I remember back in the 70s reading where the Bible talked about Ezekiel 38 about Iran joining forces with Russia, people looked at that like, yeah, that's stupid, that's ridiculous, that's never going to happen. And of course, at that time, it looked impossible. But how many know that God doesn't need for us to approve whether or not something He said is right or wrong? Okay? It may sound stupid right now, but I got news for you. The day's going to come, we're the ones that's going to look stupid. Okay? Well, the fact is, during the Islamic Revolution, which took place in 1979, it was led by the Ayatollah Khomeini. Iran began spreading its hatred for Israel and America. And you'll see this as I try to cover each of the Time magazines that's covered this from that point on. 52 American hostages were held for 444 days during the Jimmy Carter administration. And this is where the phrase came into existence, America is the great Satan. Okay? We became the great Satan. At the same time, Israel became known as the little Satan. Now, this is a dogma in Islam now. Literally, though, within months, Iran turned from being friends to becoming Israel's and America's worst enemies. So here's the thing. Right before our eyes, this became the landmark event that laid the foundation, now listen to this, folks, for Iran to become part of the Ezekiel scenario that we're going to talk about in just a second, in which the Bible teaches that Russia will lead an invasion on Israel. Now, according to Ezekiel 38 and 39, I know this is a controversy in some circles, but I doubt that too many would disagree with this. According to this passage, there is going to be a surprise attack that's going to take place against Israel by a land called Magog, which we know today, and I'm just going to give you the real quick rundown so we don't have to get into all the technical thing of this, which is known as Russia. Persia is also joining in with this attack. Persia, as we've mentioned, is modern Iran. It's important to note that most of the southern states of the former Soviet Union are now both military powerhouses and, listen, they're Muslims. This has just occurred in some of y'all's, the last question in your all's lifetime. Furthermore, Meshach, which is modern Turkey, would also turn on Israel in the same surprise attack. And in 2002, Turkey elected its pro-Islamic party to govern their country. You think that's a coincidence? Also added to the list of the invading armies in this surprise attack on Israel are Cush, which is modern Sudan, and Put, which is modern Libya. Now here's what's interesting. Just this year, April 17th, history was made when Putin went to Libya. Matter of fact, he became the first Russian leader in history to visit Libya, creating a strategic alliance, signing numerous agreements, and negotiating a $2.5 billion arms sales to the enormous and historic enemy of Israel. By the way, you think that's a coincidence? Incidentally, it is nothing short of amazing that almost 2,600 years ago, God, through the prophet Ezekiel, gave the exact list of nations that would move against Israel in the last days. And guess what? That has transpired before our eyes in the last few months. Now come on. Folks, that's never happened in history. Never. This is like pretty mind-boggling. This is pretty cool for us that are when we're seeing this begin to take place. By the way, Ezekiel also gives the outcome of the battle, which some believe will take place right before the rapture. Some believe will take place immediately after the rapture. But here's the thing. We know the outcome. The outcome is that Israel ends up miraculously surviving. 5/6 of the armies that attack Israel are destroyed. God intervenes. But here's the amazing thing. The Bible says nobody comes to Israel's aid. Now that's where it's going to get interesting. Because the question has to be, naturally, where is the United States during this war? And why doesn't America help Israel? Now, you figure that one out. There's a few logical ways we can explain it. Why doesn't America show up in prophecy? Well, number one, God didn't know it was going to show up. God didn't know it was going to be here. Well, that's funny. Some people laugh, but that is funny. Okay. Number two, reason why it don't show up is because America doesn't exist at this point. Or number three, this is a possibility. America is so insufficient and so inability, if that's even a word, to be able to stand by Israel. Something's happened. It's so crippled. It's so out of ability to help. It can't help Israel. I just know this. When I read stuff like that, I'm kind of getting a little leery. Why are we gone? Or not there? Why are we not helping? Could be at that point America is no longer standing with Israel. Well, the fact is, we know, folks, just as Ezekiel said 2,600 years ago, Russia would align itself with these other nations, as we just demonstrated, and that they would come against Israel. Now, we know for a fact, because between 1989 and 1993, Iran purchased $10 billion worth of weapons from Russia, and also began to buy Russian nuclear and ballistic missile technology. In 1992, Iran signed an agreement with Russia to revitalize their nuclear reactors that had been damaged during the war with Iraq. The agreement called for Russia to supply Iran with 2 440 megawatt reactors. Now, folks, listen to this. In November 2005, just less than 3 years ago, Russia and Iran signed another arms deal worth $1 billion. Russia is helping Iran build its first nuclear power plant. Russia has been the main source of Iranian weapon purchasing and development. Russia agrees to sell 30 Tor M1 surface-to-air missiles and other defense systems to Iran over the next 2 years. Now, can I ask you a question? Is that a coincidence? Do you honestly think, you say, well, I'm not really sure about this Bible prophecy stuff. I'm not really sure why we need to even think and read and study on that. I got news for you. It's going to bypass you if you don't pay attention. The time is flying by, folks. And it's time every once in a while I look at the watch and go, okay, wow, that's pretty quick right there. There's never been a time, ladies and gentlemen, that any of these things that I'm sharing with you has ever come to a head like now. Never. Yeah, but John, I remember hearing about Jesus going to come back in the 60s. Well, he was coming back in the 20s. He was coming back in the 1820s, in the 620s. Okay? When they went to Georgia, they flexed their muscles and said, come on, try something. Do something about it. You know why? Because we can't. We're at the mercy now. The fact is, our president, I tell you one thing I'd never want to be as a president of the United States. How about you? He said, and I quote now, this was right after Putin made that statement, George Bush, in response to that, said,